Pittsburgh, we have a lot of bridges per square mile, right? Actually, did you know that Pittsburgh has more bridges per square mile than any place on earth? Even better. So in case you ever get on Jeopardy, please split the prize money with me. So there's these boats, these clipper boats, and the Gateway Clipper. One time I went on there, and we were going under a bridge, and I saw a homeless community. And I started to think about it. You know, my heart went out to them as yours would. What would cost someone to live under a bridge? Especially in this country, right? And I thought, well, maybe they've lost everything. Maybe they're running from the law. Maybe they're running from whatever. So today we're going to talk a little bit about homelessness of a different kind. The loss of self, the loss of future, the loss of vision. But we serve a God that's a restorer. He's a redeemer. I'm totally proof of that. He takes the homeless and he gives them a home. And that's what this song is about. That when he takes us and transforms us, he changes our name. He gives us his. You call me. You call me your own. I am not forsaken. I am not forgotten. Never alone. You call me. You call me alone. Never abandoned, never ashamed, never alone. You call me. You keep calling me your own. I'm no longer forsaken. Oh, I'm certainly not forgotten. Never will I be alone again. You call me, yes, over and over. You call me your own. Never abandoned, never ashamed. I never will be abandoned again. Certainly won't be ashamed. Father, you said you never leave us nor forsake us. You're here with us now. I ask that you just bless our time in Christ's wonderful name. Morning. So good to see you all again. Friends, I would say my old friends, but some of you aren't so old. Thanks for coming out. Did you all get a packet? Yep. All right, so let's get right into the fun, shall we?
Got a green light in that?
Yep. Green light. Go. So this time up on the trip, I decided to fly instead of drive because I thought flying would be, faster. I like driving, but flying, sometimes gets you there quicker, except, of course, Thursday, where I started my day. My first flight, I think, was at 2 or 3. Got here at 2:30 a.m. We ended up getting home at 3 a.m. So plenty of coffee, wired, and excited to be here. Have you ever been on a journey where you think you know where you're going, and you get so many delays in the process? You get so many, just things happen. It's called life, right? But you know, during that entire time on Thursday, I ran into some very, very interesting people. Very interesting. I'm pretty old, and back before the days of video games where, you know, we didn't have those opportunities to sharpen our critical thinking process with games and phones, so we, you know, used our imagination. And I had this one toy that I really liked. It was called electric football. And electric football was this metal vibrating board, and you had these little men, looked like army men, but they were football men from each team. And you'd line it up in a formation, and you'd get ready to play against somebody, and you'd hit the button, and here's the play begins. And these little men are just vibrating forward, and you sit and you watch the play for 10 minutes, one play. One play. And we're like, this is great, this is fantastic. And you can order for more teams and stuff. Well, I met two guys that were on their way to Dallas for the National Electric Football Tournament. They pulled out briefcase. I'm not kidding you. They pulled out cases, flight cases. Oh, here's my team. We do college. Here's Virginia Tech. Here's North Carolina. Both home and away unis and alternate. I'm like, wow. To see someone so passionate about what someone else would call so boring, right? It just made my trip all the better. You know, that and eating at Chipotle and all those other restaurants during my 8-hour layover. So, anyways, I'm going to talk to you today on the 5 great relationships, maybe the greatest relationships that we can have and that we'll ever have. And I'm going to do my best here to try to fly through some of these because we got a lot of content to cover, but I'm really more concerned about our discussion. This whole idea of the resurgent life is basically a concept of your life being in a perpetual state of renewal and reinvention. It's a process, but it's not a perfect process. We really hope to grow in each decade of our life, growing in wisdom and in stature and in favor with God and man as Jesus grew, following his model. So one of the first relationships that we encounter is our relationship with time. And I want to talk about that for a second. Can we? The relationship with time. Seneca, who is this Native American philosopher, said the shortness of life, in his book, The Shortness of Life, he said, the space that has granted to us rushes by so speedily and so swiftly that all, save a few, find life at an end just when they are getting ready to live. Time, the value of time. And the older I get, as my grandfather used to say, the older you get, life gets to be like a roll of toilet paper. The closer to the end, the faster it goes. And no matter where you're at in life, the younger you are, the more 2 weeks seems like 2 years. And the older you get, 2 weeks seems like two hours. It's because the older you get, you gain perspective in life. When you're young, you're building perspective. You're learning things quicker than ever before because you're constantly taking in new things. But the older you get, the more intentional you have to become about change and growth and new experiences and losing weight and building income and But when you're young, you've got a free ride until you're in your 40s, and then you realize, oh, what is going on? So if you are under the age of 40, this is going to be some valuable stuff for you, because if you can grab a hold of it and think about it, you will ascend, you will move quicker and higher beyond your years among your peers. Because think about it, what we do in our culture, in our society, we group people together by age or generation. There's no diversity of wisdom in doing that. And that's really a more, present century thing than it was 200-300 years ago. There wasn't junior high ministry, and there wasn't, families and communities, young and old, interacted together. And you didn't have a 12-year-old or 18 or 12-year-old look at a 65-year-old and say, that dude's not cool. What does he know? And you didn't have an older person look at a young person and say something derogatory as well. They were viewed as a family, a unit, a community. Time back then was viewed a little bit different. So we know that time is short and time is measured. Our relationship with time, I think, if it's solely measured upon achievement and production, I think that can be a treadmill as we look at our life. Because we look at each day and we get our lists out and we say, okay, I'm going to try to get this done. And then at the end of the day, we look at our list and we either feel good about our day or not, depending on how much stuff we get done, right? Get done. Who's a list person? All right. My wife is a list person. Not a lisp, but a list person, Lori. And when she likes to talk about her list or draft her list, is at night while we're in bed. Are you kidding me? While she watches Dr. Pimple Popper. At night, in bed, when you're trying to decompress, need to relax your mind, and she'll poke me, hey, babe, you got to see this one zit this guy's it's so great. I don't want to hear that. Oh, by the way, tomorrow, David, why don't we got to do this and this. And I'm like, I'm a morning person. I've completely flipped. I'm a musician. I used to be an evening nocturnal, but now I'm a morning person. So she's a list person, and I am too. But I think our culture feeds us these false metrics about production and time, and that really goes back to the way our country was settled. There's a reason why the North and the South feel a little bit different. It's how they were settled hundreds of years ago. The North was settled through the industrial age with factories. The South, because of the land and climate, plantations. Anyone ever lived in the South before? When I moved down to Nashville, I could not understand why everybody talks so slow. And conversely, they couldn't understand why us Northerners, us Yankees, talk so fast and so stressed out, right? And it's the way that each part of the country was settled. You understand that centuries ago, our ancestors worked in the fields. They worked in the fields. And here's how they governed their day. Sun up. Okay, let's go out into the fields. Sundown. Okay, let's go in for dinner. They had no clocks. Our ancestors had no clocks. It was governed, their days were governed by sun up and sundown. You know, the popular trend today is living off the grid, right? People just try to do things and live off the grid. And my kids are all missionaries, and they're in Zambia, and they talk about really living off the grid when they go into the bush. And there are places in the country that don't know about, culture. There's still places in the world that don't know about Jesus or Elvis or Xbox or anything like that. But there's always been a desire in mankind to get off the grid, to somehow uncouple and to retreat. And I think it's important that we reframe our relationship with time, knowing that the days are fleeting and investing in time in a different way than what we've been enculturated by. See, what happened when the Industrial Revolution happened, what you had people move. I don't want to get ahead of our people here. on the thing, on the points, but let me just pass this. I'll circle back. And then when the industrial age happened, people on the farms moved in to the factories. They were moving into the urban areas. And the Industrial Revolution had this concept of, okay, everybody's going to punch in. You're going to go to your station, all right? And then when the time's up, a whistle's going to blow, and you're going to move either to the lunchroom or somewhere else. And what the Industrialized Revolution did is now time was now looked at as a commodity. So if I am loafing on the job, if I'm talking instead of not working, I'm affecting the bottom line. And that shift in how we looked at time has become normalized over the past 150 years. And I think there was a reason, obviously, why God instituted the Sabbath. I think He knew our challenge with time wouldn't be the problem, but we'd inherit this industrialized idea of time. God mandated a Sabbath because He knew it was our fallen propensity to do and do and do, work and work and work, and not be a human being, but a human doing. So He instituted the Sabbath. And there was actually repercussions for not obeying certain things on the Sabbath, which kind of went awry. But I think it's important that we practice the art of uncoupling, retreating, stepping away from doing things. And it can be difficult when we're constantly... Let me ask you this question. Do you find yourself when you drive in a hurry for no apparent reason? I do. I'm going past the speed limit, and I've had to catch myself several times saying, what am I in a hurry for? You're just on that automatic pilot of here, there, here, there. There are two types of time that the Bible talks about. There's chronos and kairos. Chronos is the time we typically understand. It's a time of duration. It's governed by clocks, things of that sort. But then there's kairos or kairos. Richard Rohr called it deep time. It means the fullness of time. It means those moments where everything clicks, where past and present merge into a beautiful moment of clarity and focus and fullness. It's when we realize that no matter what happens in chronos time, we inhabit a life that is already full, here, and now. This is this concept of deep time. And living in deep time, at times, gives us more sense of fullness of life, being alive. It's being more present to the people around you and to yourself. It's a sense of timelessness. Deep time. You know who lives in deep time constantly? Babies, babies, and toddlers. Toddlers, children are constantly living in deep time. And they like to pull us parents into it as well, and grandparents into it, right? And it's amazing that the Bible, and Jesus talked about the faith of a child. We talked about childlike type of positions of the heart. But kids live in this idea, this concept of deep time. You know who else lives in deep time? Creatives. Creatives live in deep time. They start to create, whether you're painting, whether you're building. If you ever do something that when you do it, you just lose track of all time. And your spouse or your kids got to come to you and say, hey, Dad, hey, Mom, hey, where? And 2 hours have gone by, and it seems like 5-10 minutes. That's the purpose of God. When we are functioning in the Sabbath, in our passion, in our design with our gifts and abilities, we enter into this divine deep time. Amen. In the movie Chariots of Fire, Eric Liddell said, this Olympic runner, he says, when I run, I feel His presence. So I think we need to relook at how we see time. The Industrial Revolution made time a commodity. If we're not working, we're costing the man, the boss, money and wasting time. So if our time management is always about the bottom line, we have to be aware to uncouple from that. Because being present is very rare. It's tough. And being present consistently is even tougher. That's why it helps to have some version of meditation, of stillness, of being present, prayer, anything without technology. Because calmness is a byproduct of being off the treadmill of doing and doing and doing and being in front of stimuli and stimuli. It's a byproduct. And once time is a resource to be used and we feel pressured to use it well, it becomes a rigged game that we fail at. So I want us to think about time differently. Let me ask you a few questions. Because we all have downtime in life. We plan it out. 2 weeks out of the year, 1 week out of the year, we're going on vacation. But how many of you find it hard to unwind when you go on vacation for the first couple of days? Correct. It's like that sensation when you have been traveling or on a boat, right, for hours at a time, and then you finally step into stable ground and you feel the inertia of that you've been in movement for hours. It's the same with doing and doing when you uncouple or retreat. So it takes you a couple days to, some of us, to decompress. Well, if you still have your phone with you, you can still be in the company of others but not be present. And I think it is a pandemic. It is a pandemic of lives not being present internally and with those around them. And it has changed our culture. The thing is, we can't have an experience we're not present for. So being present and giving somebody presence is the greatest gift that we can give. I mean, even an experience itself isn't the experience it could be if while it's going on, we're somewhere else. That's why when we go to church, just because somebody shows up in church doesn't make them any more of a Christian or a believer than standing in a garage makes you a car, right? So begin to practice that. And in order to do that, I think we need to say no to the tyranny of the urgent. Everything does not have to be done now. And if it doesn't get done, some things, okay, it doesn't get done. And I used to struggle with that for years, especially leading my team. Well, if it doesn't get done, I'm going to have to do it. And then finally my wife said, well, what if you don't do it? What's the worst thing that can happen? Then it's not going to get done. Well, what if it doesn't get done? Then what's going to happen? Well, she goes, don't you think if it doesn't get done, somebody will eventually step up and do it? No. Control. I have to control. There are some things that we have to learn how to say a healthy no and say, yeah, that's a good thing, but it's just not good for me right now. I grew up in the church, and I was in church, let's see, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, got Friday off, Saturday was off, Sunday morning, Sunday night. And there were times that I felt guilty for telling someone, you know, I'm not going to be there on Wednesday night this week. Why? What are you doing? Well, you know, me and my wife we're going to do nothing. We've just been going and going. Now, every pastor gets afraid at this illustration, because on the other side of the scale, you have people that when they take a break, they actually come to church, right? And they do all kinds of other things. But my point is, whether it's a job, whether it's, taking Johnny, Sally, Colton, Brianna, whatever, to 4 different activities throughout the week. Well, we have soccer, we have dance, there's chess club, so you are caught in the tyranny of the urgent, and your life is on autopilot, and you never experience deep time. In order to unplug from that, I think we need to learn the art of the creative no. No. It's the first word that we learn as a kid, right? No. And it's the first word we tell our kids. No. You can reframe your no's as a response to feel more in control of your time, right? You can reframe your no's as a response to feel more freedom. And it's okay at times to pursue the pointless. Let me say that again. It's okay sometimes to pursue the pointless. I mean, what's the point? Does it need to have a point? I just want to go for a walk. I want to stare at the wall. My wife, when we fly, I've got everything going on. Hey, I'm flying. I'm going to get stuff done. I got my iPad. I got my music on. I'm doing. You know what my wife will do? She'll just sit there. Like David Putty. If you're any Seinfeld fans. She'll just sit there and just be. And I'll look over. Do you want to listen to some music? No. Do you want a book? No, I'm fine. And she is completely comfortable and in this sense of deep time with being present. And I'm like, wow. So give yourself the freedom. Free to pursue stuff that doesn't make you money or improve your social media status. Stuff, you do it for no apparent reason. It's like playing, once again, with your kids or your grandkids. When you get down on the floor with your kids, or if that's ever happened to you when you were young, or maybe you're older now and people still get down on the floor and play with you, right? But this idea of deep time of, there's nowhere else I'd rather be right now than this moment. And those moments don't have to be uber significant or have a point. You just be a human and enjoy. And for you, it might be, walking, playing, painting, writing stories, playing with puzzles, working with wood or soil. So guard yourself from things like that, feeling like you're wasting time. And try to resist the urge to disconnect from those type of disconnecting moments. Because other stuff won't get done. Because the stats are off the chart. Our addiction to time and productivity and achievement, it's killing us. We are number 1 in the world for users of depression medication and anxiety treatment. It's crazy. So, what focuses that you have feel like fun to you? What are some things you focus on that just, they're fun, they don't affect the bottom line, anybody want to just name some things that you feel like you're experiencing deep time when you're focused on it? Your job? God. Dog. Your dog? I'm sorry. Hello? I don't hear you. That's because you're an idiot. Sorry. I'm saying that about what? Graphic design. Fishing. Fishing.
Basketball.
Nice. Gardening.
Animal Crossing.
Yeah, fantastic. So then ask yourself, of that activity that you do that you enjoy, that feeds your soul, am I giving my soul more of that? And as you increase giving yourself more of that, the more your heart begins to swell. And it's in those times, I don't know about you, but when I'm not thinking about stuff is when some of the most intimate moments with God, or the creative moments or ideas or things that come out of me. So, deep time. Any questions on that? I'm done with that first great relationship. All right. Good. Let me move on to the second one. This one will take a little bit longer. Another great relationship. And none of these are in order or as priority, things of that sort. I did put God in the center. But the next one I want to talk about is your relationship with yourself. Your relationship with you. You have to understand that the person you will spend the most time with is the person that will influence you the most and for the longest time is, you know why I say that? Every Sunday morning when Pastor Mark is here speaking, there's two voices. There's two sermons that are happening. There's the sermon that is happening as Pastor Mark is speaking to you. Then there's the sermon in your head that's preaching to you about what he's preaching about. And guess which one runs the show? Yeah. The person you will be alone with the most is you. Once again, my wife, if she was here, we'll come home and she'll go to the back of the condo and she'll just be sitting in a chair. And I'll go over, what are you doing over there? Why don't you come in and watch TV with me? Or why don't you just be in the room with me? You know, we're wired differently. She gets energized completely being by herself. And I'm a little bit of an introvert too, but if you're an introvert, I want to set you free today. You don't need fixed. You don't need fixed. I think Jesus was an introvert. He withdrew from the crowds to be alone with God, to be alone with himself, to just recharge, right? But you are the person you will be alone with the most. You're the person that you'll rely on the most. The person you take care of the most. The person you need the most love and support from, need to be kindest to and love and understand is you. So I know it's obvious, but it's really least obvious. Because seeing ourselves that way doesn't come naturally. And especially if you've grown up in the church, you've been caught in this residue, in this preaching of extreme self-denial. And Pompini taught it in the Roman ages, and it's been peppered in through some theologians. But when we look at Jesus, Jesus said this: love the Lord your God with all your, right? Your heart, mind, and soul. Right, straight. And love your neighbor as you love yourself. So we stop at love the Lord your God. Yes, just love your neighbor. Yes, evangelism. And that's it. What about loving you? I talked about this before. Because that is important. I believe that how you feel about yourself, how you treat yourself, how the kindness you are about yourself, I believe it relays on and projects onto others. Some of the most critical and judgmental people that I know about others are secretly critical and judgmental themselves. And it's such a dark place to live. Well, what is the basis for our own personal value? I'll share that tomorrow. Basis for our own personal value is based upon the worth and the price willing to be paid for that. So I think we live disconnected lives because the moment we're born, that's the last day of freedom that will ever experience. You know, God, it's the last day God had us all to himself. Because as soon as we are born, these layers get put on us, these layers and labels. It's not right or wrong, it just is, right? And they separate us from our true, unique, God-designed self. And then nature and nurture, child raising, is put on you and it goes crazy. Then you go to school and they take the industrialized idea of time and they apply it to school where they don't use a whistle, they use a bell or a tone and they move you from room to room. Because the industrialized approach is uniformed. Everyone is the same. Everyone is the same. Everyone learns the same. Everyone sees the same. If we can get sameness, then we have success. And when you look at the agricultural model, and let's face it, Jesus did not teach in the West. It was in the East, in the Eastern world. I mean, do you see corn that grows? Do you see crops, trees that grow that are exactly the same? And even if there's a commonality of nutrients that they need to grow, there's varying degrees of that. That speaks of that to the wonder of God and the uniqueness of how each and every one of us is created. So I think when these labels are put on us and conditioning and society, what happens is after that we move further and further away from our unique self that God created us to be. Call it an estrangement. And to not know who that person is that you're spending the most time with is to live estranged from the most important human in your life. And that goes on automatic pilot as you chase all the things we're supposed to chase in order to find fulfillment, in order to find identity, until one day we have exhausted all of that and we're like, who am I? Most people spend their entire life separated from their true, unique, God-made self. So I think, though, the most important commandment in that chain, all those commandments are important. Loving yourself, the relationship with yourself. And so, listen, I self-loathed. I did not like myself for the longest time. I would look in the mirror and I would cuss myself out because of the things that I'd done, things that had been done to me. And God's love, yeah, I knew about it, but I wasn't applying it to me. It was like I was excluded from all of this. And, it's very important that we make that journey and we don't go from one autopilot model of this is you to another. That meaning has to be forged. So, and we see this with parents. Parents that grow up that don't know who they are, they pass that on to their kids. And we try to fill the gap with roles, titles, gifts, accomplishments. And what we're doing, we're just adding more layers that separate us from ourselves. And I'm convinced, and Pastor Mark and I have talked about this, many of the problems that we face in society, in family, in organizations, in churches, are not so much corporate problems, but they're personal problems. It's because we do not know who we are. Well, we're in Christ, and that's whose we are, and that's a part of it. But was God up in heaven making robots, or are we uniquely and fearfully, wonderfully made? Right? So those layers are false versions that over time feel like it's the real us. How many have ever restored furniture? Right? I'll never forget seeing a jelly cupboard that was at this antique mall that we dropped $400 for to buy junk. And my wife, I saw just a bunch of garbage. But she saw gold. She saw treasure. She saw what was underneath all the layers of varnish and paint over time that was on this jelly cupboard. She had an eye for restoration. But it didn't happen overnight. You begin to scrape, right? You peel away that layer. Oh, there's another layer. Then you peel that one. Oh, there's another. Because your goal is to get down to the original. And you are an original, brilliant piece of God's craftsmanship. And a disconnected self will try to seek its identity or its home in someone else's version of you. Let me say that again. A disconnected self will try to seek a home in someone else's version of you. And let's be honest, folks, the need to maintain all those layers, it's so exhausting. I have 2 brothers and a sister. My oldest brother has been a college football coach for almost 30 years, and my middle brother is a pastor. And when I'm in town, you know how I'm greeted when people try to figure out who I am? You're the singer. Oh, yeah, you're the singer. It's a label. Labels aren't wrong. Labels are labels, right? But if you're disconnected and don't really know who you are, you really try to make your home in someone else's version of you, and you become homeless, like the people under the bridge that I sang about, who, put it this way, I started to think about this, and I said, if I have to show my love for you by abandoning me to do that, then I've really become homeless from who I really am. And that's what society commands us to do, right? That just, you're this, you're that, you're this. And society and culture, listen, we are not our thoughts, we are not our ethnicity, we are not our gender, we are not our religion, we are not, all of those labels. And that society, both inside and outside the church world, will tell us this is who you are. And they're just layers. Let me ask you this question. Can you tell me who you are? This is rhetorical. Can you tell me who you are without mentioning what you do? Your roles? Your ethnicity? That's kind of tough to answer when you think about it. How does one answer that question without those roles, right? Without, well, I'm a dad, I'm a minister, I'm an analyst, because we've been so conditioned to subscribe to wrong layers of identity. It's like once you strip that all away, okay, I'm not my role, I'm not, you kind of feel a little dumb, like, oh, well, then what, who, huh? So if tomorrow you lost it all, not up here, but if you lost all of those labels, all of that, are you still you? Yeah, but who the heck is that? Right? Who the heck at? Who is that? I think the search, the work, the task, the quest throughout life is an uncovering of that. A discovery of that the presence of God is all in creating and revealing that uniqueness. And that adds to such peace in our life. But it's so awkward to do in a world full of badges. Especially when you're pressured to be someone or something, right? Do you know yourself? Let me ask you this. Do you know yourself well enough to know which self you've accepted? Is the self you think you are, is that your parents' version of you? Is that society's version of you? Is that your religion's version of you? Is that what your spouse wants you to be, your family, your friends, your coworkers? You know, labels and versions make a role rather than the real you, is my point to all of this. So, are you shaped by your trauma? Is your past trauma who you think you are? Maybe because you've accepted that, and that's who you're supposed to be, because you've been that way for so long. It feels normal. Have you accepted the person your religion has shaped you to be? Or your socioeconomics? Socioeconomics is a big one. Huge. Because you know, poverty, which we believe is a curse, it's generational. And to break that cycle, I saw a statistic that said by the time you get to the third generation in a household of Christians, it's cemented in stone. It carries on from generation to generation. Well, if that law of transfer is for good things, it's also swings the other way, right? So it takes a lot to break that cycle. I think all of these labels cause a deep seat of confusion of who we are, so we stay busy. That's why our relationship with time is, if I can do and stay busy, I don't have to think about that stuff. So we become very shallow people. And listen, don't think this is a binary fill in the blank, this is who I am. We spend our whole entire life discovering, rediscovering, renewing, reinventing who we are. That gets back to the original. You know, we existed before we came here, right? We existed before we had a brain. That's right. And imagine the magnificence of what God created. So this is the journey of getting back to, it's the resurgence, it's the return, it's the renewal, it's the revival of it all. And I get it. I get it. It can be a little convoluted, but I'm going to tell you, you don't have to be homeless. You can come back home to the you God created you to be. You can come back home. Coming back to your true, original, God-designed, unique self, it's a game changer. What did God have in mind when He created you and me? Knowing you starts with knowing what are the false versions of you. What are those inauthentic versions that kind of still feel like you? Because a wrong version of you feels like you because it's been there for decades, and that's why it doesn't reveal itself without scrutiny. And here's what I ask myself. When I feel that tension, I'll ask myself, why don't I feel at home in this situation? Why do I feel like somebody else when doing this? Try to give that language. I'll just give my example. I mean, growing up a minister, there were years that I preached and sounded like somebody else. Because you imitate until, and the imitation becomes a substitution until the original can arise. That's why the most inauthentic versions of us feel like us, and here's what it's called. It's called the ego. And everyone has an ego. But few people understand what that is. The ego was coined by a psychologist by the name of Carl Jung, J-U-N-G. Carl Jung's father was a pastor. His mother was spirit-filled, spiritualist, right? He was a brilliant man. He was going to enter the ministry, but he felt compelled that his purpose in life was to be a psychologist, and he could serve the world better. He could have been a pastor, a scientist, a teacher. So according to Jung, the ego, it represents the conscious mind as it comprises the thoughts, your memories, your emotions that you're aware of, right? So it's largely responsible for feelings of identity and continuity, right? So the ego's job is to protect the false construct that was put around your life since childhood. So let me just say this. I'm going to have to say this again. Your true, authentic self says you are separated from me. The more you live that false life, the more homeless you become internally. The furniture represents it. When you accept those layers upon you as a child, it continues. Jesus had an ego. An ego is amoral. It's how it's bent and what it serves. Jesus' ego was this. His label was carpenter's boy, carpenter's son from Nazareth. And you don't think Jesus' labels weren't put on him? Can anything good come out of Nazareth? Imagine growing up with that. I think the reason why some people have a midlife crisis is they realize one day, how did I get here? I lived my life in compliance to somebody else's version of me. But it doesn't happen in midlife. It happens through the teenage years. It begins in junior high. When in order to be accepted, you have to clone yourself with what everybody's doing, thinking, believing, because there's such a desire, because identity involves intimacy, centeredness, balance, wholeness. And the word crisis suggests that something needs fixed, but it's really an unraveling. Let me close with this in this section. The journey for the best version of you and I will continue all through our life until we leave this place and re-enter heaven. And I think stepping up and showing up and asking yourself these questions in a real world is vital in becoming the real you. Because your destiny, our why, the reason why we're here, it is dormant until the real you shows up. Any Star Wars fans here? All right. Do you remember in A New Hope, which is episode 4, right? We have this frustrated Luke Skywalker that's on this planet of Tatooine. He's frustrated. He's got this purpose, this why, this dream, but he's in a place surrounded by sand. There is nothing going on. He is stuck. And you can tell in his frustration. Then a droid shows up. This droid, R2-D2, shows this hologram of Princess Leia. Shows it to another character, Obi-Wan Kenobi. And a purpose is revealed. Something arises in Luke. His calling gets awakened by this droid. And I think a lot of times we're stuck in life because it's an awareness of what we're doing is not working. So we double our efforts and keep doing it. It's not working. So let's triple our efforts and do it. My brother Gino coaches football, and they used to be a scholarship school, giving athletic scholarships, and they would win and win and win and win because he's a great coach. About 7 years ago, they moved to Division III, which is non-scholarship, which means if you're going to play football or any sport, you got to do it for the love of the game, not because you're getting your education paid for. Well, he could not compete with all the other schools that were behind the scenes giving athletic scholarships out, but disguising them as leadership scholarships. And he'd always say this to me, because year after year, he had his hands tied, trying to win. And he'd say, I don't know, we just got to outwork him. We got to outwork him. We got to outwork him. Doing the same thing. Oh, and it didn't matter. The schools who cheated and the schools with more money won. Then he changed and said, it's not how we're working, but what are we working on that can make the difference? And I think stuckness is something we don't have to be afraid of. Stuckness is proof that you're getting ready for a shift in your life. It's a sign that you're doing an encounter with a droid. That's what it means. So look for those droid moments in your life. Look for those. I think everybody needs an Obi-Wan Kenobi to give language to those moments. Why is this important? Because your destiny, your purpose, your why, that can only truly, effectively be channeled through. Otherwise, there'll be countless clones of you. And I've lived through many of them. It's like I think we all gravitate to certain things in our wardrobe. Some say that you only wear 10% of your wardrobe. Who would agree with that, right? There's some things you put on that but yet the rest of our wardrobe, they may be for certain occasions or certain things, but there's clothes we try on that we wear them, but it could be like 10, 15% of the And my wife, she once set me straight on this. She said, when you shop for clothes, stop looking for sales. Sales are good. Stop looking for more. When you try something on, if you don't feel absolutely fantastic in it, don't buy it. It's that simple. My closet, stuffed. I must have like 40 black t-shirts or what. Her closet, bare minimum. And she'll tease me. I don't know why a man needs so many pairs of shoes. But we still gravitate to the same favorite pair of jeans, the same shirt, right? Why? Because it feels right. And that's what the real you feels like. And when we try on somebody else's version of us, we can do it, but it starts chafing in the wrong places, right? It starts shrinking. It starts showing, right? So when we begin starting to say no of these previous older versions of you, what happens is an empowerment and a freedom starts to build. But your ego, his job is to protect you. And it's not tamed by ignoring it, but by listening to it. You tame your ego not by ignoring it, but by listening to it. Because the ego hates scrutiny. It hates those questions that reveal deeper things in your life. I think this is why Jesus said, what profit a man if he gains the whole world yet loses his soul? Is he talking about the separation of self? Because the soul is immune from the drive of performing to gain the world. Your inner man, as you know, if we call the soul your inner man, So, when you build your home in someone else, your ability to access yourself is through their permissions. And whoever you make your home in gives them power to make you homeless when it comes to being you. It wasn't your fault. It wasn't its fault. It's just the temptation to subcontract yourself out to someone else and call it your home. And how you realize this is through something called self-awareness. Self-awareness is the ability to step outside of yourself and see yourself and ask yourself and look at how you think, why you're thinking that way. So I'm going to stop with this one. I know there's a lot more on this, but let me just finish by saying this. Win deep, not shallow. Winning shallow is when you achieve but compromise being you. Winning deep is staying true to that favorite pair of jeans, that favorite shirt, that you. Any questions on this stuff at all? Let me say this too. Well, how do I know more and more who I am? I think it's by being more aware of what you're not and who you're not. Just like you're trying on clothes. That doesn't fit. Why doesn't that fit? Oh yeah, it's too tight around here, or it doesn't. I think those are great questions to ask. Anybody getting anything out of this? All right. Let's take a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back, and then I'll try to finish up here in about 45 minutes. All right?
You are the one who came to save, lavishing love, amazing grace. You are the one we call on your name, Jesus. You are the one, no other name under heaven, no one by which we're saved. You are the one we call on your name, Jesus, Jesus, yeah. One way, one truth, one life in you. One way, one truth, one life in you, Jesus. Oh, 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 no other name. Oh, 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 no other name. Oh, 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 no other name but Jesus. Oh, 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 no other name. Oh, 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 no other name I know. Oh, oh, no other name but Jesus. You are the one who came to save, lavishing love, amazing grace. You are the one when you come on your name, Jesus. You are the one. There's no greater name under heaven, no one by which we're saved. You are the one. We'll shout out your name, Jesus, Jesus, yeah. One way, one truth, one life in you. One way, one truth, one life in you, Jesus. Oh, 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 no other name. Oh, 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 no other name. Oh, 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 no other name but Jesus. Oh, 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 no other name. Oh, 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 no other name I know. Oh, oh, no other name but Jesus. Yeah. And with that name, we have every privilege and we have every blessing because we are in Christ. From everlasting to the everlasting, you reigning forever, forevermore. From everlasting to the everlasting, you reign forever, forevermore.
Our forefathers were actually, I mean, they were crazy. They were wild. They had, some of them had illegitimate children. And when I said that, someone leans back to Pat and says, Pat, what does illegitimate mean? And Pat goes, hey, what are you, ignorant? It means when you can't read or write. Pat immediately became my favorite student. So he came up to me last week of school and he said, Mr. DeMarco, am I going to pass this class? I said, well, let's look at your grade here, Pat. You've got a 34% and you need a 70 to pass. Mr. DeMarco, can I do some extra credit? I said, what do you mean, like word searches, crossword puzzles to boost your grade up, you know? He says, I'm sorry, Mr. DeMarco, it's just I've been working at night at the shop, and my girlfriend, you know, we're having a baby, and I'm just not into school. I said, oh, the shop? He said, yeah, I'm a mechanic. I do body work. I said, really? Have you ever installed car stereos? Well, yeah. So I got some extra credit for you. You come to my class tomorrow. So I'm holding class. He's in my car installing a Sony system. And the principal comes walking by. My room was right near the window overlooking the parking lot. And the principal, Dr. Oler, comes over to me. Hey, Mr. Marco, how's it going? It's going good. And we're leaning against the window. It's a beautiful day. Yeah, it is, Dr. Oler. Is that somebody in your car? I'm like, yeah. Is that Pat McBain in your car? Yeah, it is, Doctor. That's who it is. Well, what's he doing in your car? Extra credit. He laughed. Oh, let me skip ahead. I'm going to backtrack, but since we're on this subject, let's talk about our relationship with others. We talked about our relationship with time. We talked about our relationship with ourselves. And don't worry, we'll get to God and calling. But if we don't get to God, I think you guys, have that part down. But we'll get to it. Our relationship with others. It's very crucial. Because as we said before, how we treat ourselves, how we know ourselves, how we're kind to ourselves, how we love ourselves, it's going to seep out into how we love others. My wife is one of the kindest people I've known. She is so patient with people. Like, if we experience road rage and someone cuts me off, I get upset. I might even drive a little faster. But Lori is different. She'll say, that doesn't bother me. I just think in my head, well, maybe they're in a hurry on their way to the hospital. Maybe their friend's sick or their parent's sick. And she, instead of being quick to judge, she just is kind. And I'm telling you, when I met this woman, I'm thinking, who is like this? And I live with her every day. And I'm like, wow. Unless I drop a crumb on the floor, then she's, OCD on that stuff, baby. Our relationship with others. Proverbs 11:25 says, a generous person will prosper. Whoever refreshes others will be refreshed. The law, the divine law of sowing and reaping affects everything we do in life. All the resources we have, not just finances, but our time, our words, everything. Zig Ziglar said this, if you go looking for a friend, you're going to find they're scarce. If you go out to be a friend, you'll find them everywhere. Remember Mr. Rogers said, look for the helpers. Look for the helpers. Fred Rogers, pride of Pittsburgh, PA, baby. Your resources are found in your relationships. Everything that we need in life, someone has. Now, I'm looking at this not as being an opportunist. I'm looking at this as God placed man in a garden, in Eden, where they were surrounded by provision. We have to walk through this life in some ways, realizing that the presence of God, that Eden, resides in a kingdom that's in the hearts of mankind, especially the believer. And in every person, there are rich resources that grow our lives, not just materially, but internally, emotionally, intellectually. I mean, even the wicked has wealth that's laid up for the righteous, the Bible says. So your resources are in your relationships. Zig Ziglar also said this. He said, you can get about anything in life if you first help someone get what they want in life. So in order to live a resource-rich life, you have to live a relationship-rich life. Reminds me of the story of the widow, 2 Kings 4, right? You know the story. The prophet comes to town. She's starving. We're going to die. My son's going to... And you know the instructions, right? Go get some jars of oil. Go around, ask all your neighbors for empty jars. Don't ask for just a few. You know, I look at that as much as the miracle of the oil is the miracle of how relationally rich this woman's life was. In order to come back with these jars, how many people she knew that would lend her things? That was just as much a miracle the way I see it. Those resources were relational. I mean, she had to have gotten along with her neighbors. I don't think all her neighbors went to the same church she went to. They probably didn't all believe like she did. Our resources are found in our relationships. Jesus didn't need stuff. He didn't. He just needed to know people who had stuff, right? He didn't need a donkey. He didn't need a fish or a tomb. He just knew people who did. I think that's the reason why he sent out the disciples with nothing in order to teach them to build relationships and not rely on resources, right? So commit to that idea, fresh and new, to build a relational, rich life, and you'll always have access to the resources you need. Okay? Think about right now in your life. I think many times we just lose sight of how relationally rich our life is. And it's not about quantity, but it's about quality. A friend of mine once said that you can measure the smile of God upon your life by the relationships He sends into your life. And I got to confess to you that there were times I missed that hour of visitation because I didn't recognize the value of certain relationships in my life. But God is so redemptive in that. So look for those in your life that have the resources that you need. That's why mentors are huge. I'm big on mentors. I'm big on this idea of friendship. Friends increasing each other, regardless of position or title. I think Jesus taught us, He taught me just as much about followership than leadership. He said, I don't do anything, I don't say unless I see my Father. He followed. He followed. And that's why he became a great leader, because you cannot give what you don't possess. So that's the relationship with others. Anybody want to add a comment or a question to that? I was going to go into a word about boundaries, but I'll do that another time. I once was asked the question, well, David, I desire for friends. How do you, in this day and age, how do you make friends? How do you? And I didn't mean to oversimplify it, because I was once told this. You want friends? Be a friend. Be a friend. I speak about the 5-minute revolution, the 5-minute revolution rule, that if we give somebody 5 minutes, somebody we don't know, of our presence and our attention, whether it's each day or every other day, you'll be surprised of where those conversations lead and the connection that happens. Without trying to convert them, without trying to recruit them, right? Yep. Just giving. Do you know, I was so lonely. I would used to go to stores just to talk to people. And I see that a lot at my wife's store, where people just come in and they stay a long time just because they want to be seen and they want to be heard. And the most precious commodity we can give somebody is our presence, our attention, our time, because those are fossil fuels. They're non-renewable resources. Once they're spent, they're gone. That's why they're so valuable. So
let me ask you a question. So along these lines, years ago, the Lord brought to my mind the Tim McGraw song. Tim McGraw song, "Live Like You're Dying," which, if you don't know that song, it's basically this guy gets diagnosed with probably cancer or something like this, and the doctors only got him so long, and the whole song's a story about, so what'd you do? And he said, took a bull, went on a bull ride, like just started living life. But like the second verse is what really hit me one day, and he says, I became the friend a friend would like to have. And so can you take a minute and talk about, because I think it's so good what you're saying, but what our tendency is, if our ego is out of alignment, our tendency is to see relationships as a resource. And when the resources don't come when we think they should come, it damages the relationship. You know what I mean? So I think it's so important to know who we are so that we can give. So what I say in our church all the time is like, I still have strings attached to everything I do. They're just not attached this way. They're attached this way, right? So I give somebody something, my time, money. The only thing I don't lend out is my chainsaw, right? Anything else, like if I do something for you, that's it, end of story. I don't care if I never see you again. You know what I mean? I don't care if I never see you again, because I'm giving to the Lord, right? So can you hit that for a minute?
That's a great question. Once again, I don't want to oversimplify this. And many times, at least me, when I hear something, I interpret it and receive it. That voice in my head goes binary, all or none, all or none. But it's really about balance and both and this or that. I would like to tell you that it helps to reframe how we see relationships, because most of the relationships we have in life are transactional. Not a whole lot are transformational.
That's right.
And that's okay, right? I mean, I've been around, even in ministry, transactional relationships, the conference circuit, ministering at churches and things like that, and where there's an agenda. David, we need you to do that. And when that agenda is fulfilled, the relationship is no longer maintained like it once was. And man, that can damage you to the core, right? Then you have those transformational relationships that may have started out transactionally. Like Mark and I, we've been friends since, mid-2000, early, right?
We're pushing 20 years.
Right. Completely transformational and transparent. I think you can only have so many of those in your life because they're so powerful, right? But again, we look at God the Father. We look at Christ as our example. That God is love, and what does love do? Love gives. Love gives. And in order for love to be love, it has to have an object, a target to give itself to. Even yourself as a target, or a nest for it, or open hands, but giving to others. And here we go again, the law of reciprocity. Give, and it'll come back to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, run over, shall men pour into your bosom. Once again, resources, relationship, all right? But also, I think managing that has to do with expectations.
Sure.
And when your expectations are not sincere, that's when you become more of an opportunist, a person of opportunity rather than one of honor. Here's the reality of it. I think if you go through your life and if you can count, I can probably count on my hand, maybe 3, right? 2, 3.
I mean, even if you have one, you're blessed. But being that friend, and some of the opportunities I got, when I got to record, I don't like to name drop. Most of the time, doors that were opened for me was not because I was trying to be an opportunist. It was because I was being a friend. I walked with somebody through it, and they came out of it opening the treasures of their heart. Right? So I think as we go through life, the nature of God as a giver, when we see people in need, people are always in need. We are needy creatures. And some of the greatest needs that people have are disguised the best. That's why you can't go on outer appearances. But the story of the Good Samaritan shows us three different types of kingdoms that happen in relationships. We see the kingdom of God, we see the kingdom of man, and we see the kingdom of darkness. And here were the three responses when someone was in need and kicked off to the side of the road. You know, you had the thief that said the kingdom of darkness is what's yours is mine. I'll do whatever I can to get it. The kingdom of man, the religious leaders that walked by basically said, what's mine is mine, and I'm going to keep it. And that's something, whatever we hold on to in life, we lose. We lose. But whatever leaves our hands never leaves our life. That's why if people were so married and held on and stingy with their finances, you know it's just the tip of the iceberg. Because money's the easiest thing for God to provide. Money's the easiest thing. I mean, we'll give money. It costs much less than our time, our attention, our gifts, right? And then you have the kingdom of God and the Good Samaritan that says, what's mine is yours if you want it. From the dawn of time, Satan steals, humans hoard, God gives. Yeah. Another great country song is by Rascal Flatts, How They Remember You.
Yep. Great song.
Talks about, yeah. I love the saying of, when God blesses you, don't build a bigger fence, build a bigger table. You know? All right. 20 minutes, I'm going to fly through this. Your relationship with God. Keith, you keep laughing. You don't have faith in me, do you? Doggone it. Yeah.
Same thing. Starting my third closing.
No. Hey, I've covered 3 out of the 5. So I'm going to do calling last. I'll do God first. I'm going to tell you my experience with my relationship with God continues to, like everybody else's, continues to expand. We hear this nowadays, word deconstructing your faith. And we get so threatened by deconstruct. The people that are deconstructing their faith that I have run into, there's a root wound that they've been hurt by the church, not by God. And when people wrestle with God, it's not so much God they're wrestling with. They're wrestling with a hurt. I know we throw words around like the church does this wrong, the church does that wrong, but we're really talking about flawed humans. We're not talking about His church without spot or blemish that He's coming back for, right? So my wrestling wasn't so much when I went through this stuff, I wasn't wrestling with God. I was wrestling with religion masquerading as God. And it's okay to do that. It's okay to ask those questions. And the moment I began asking questions about the transactional nature of religion, because religion, you do this, we'll do this, you stay in line, whenever I started asking questions, man, the religious rule keepers and the dogma directors, man, were fighting me tooth and nail. because the rules are rigged in favor of the rulers of the church galaxy. I'm talking about religion versus spirituality, which I'm going to get into, right? Oh, man, and all this wrestling, I never had a problem with God. God's not insecure or threatened. I mean, we read in the same Bible when we see David wrestle with God in the Psalms. God's not protective. He's not controlling. But religion is. And the church can be the church, little c. Not his church, big C. And in all this wrestling, I never really felt God's disapproval. I never had a problem with God. Never felt his judgment or rejection in wrestling. Because I was able to, and I encourage you to this, is separate your relationship with God with your relationship with his people and the church, little c. Because there's no perfect church, there's no perfect pastor, there's no perfect marriage, there's no, you ain't perfect, I ain't perfect. So let's be people of grace. Just as we talked about, man has an ego, religion has an ego. It has a layer, and it'll put that layer on you, kind of like the layer of paint on that beautiful piece of furniture. And I see this everywhere I go. When I go to churches and I talk about change and reinvention, everybody's, yes, everybody loves the idea of change until you get into the process of change. Right? Process of change. It's crazy. I'll never forget this pastor who was allowing me to use his building for outreach. He says, yeah, brother, you can do whatever you want, blah, blah, blah. The only thing we ask is you don't bring any drinks in the sanctuary. We don't want it to stay in the carpet. I'm thinking, we got all kinds of stains coming here tonight, Pastor. that's beyond coffee. People embrace the idea of change, but they resist the process. So I think we all want to see more authenticity and reality in the church. I don't think that's the issue. I think the masquerade is something. Because the more you grow and reinvent yourself, you're going to see God right there with you. How you see God. And what God loves to do is to prove himself to us that we are far from having him figured out. Right? He will put mud in a blind man's eye. He will cause an axe to float. I love the story of the centurion, the faith of the centurion, where Jesus said, I haven't seen all the faith. Up until that point, if you were healed by Jesus, Jesus was in your presence. It was such a game changer. When the centurion said, hey, you don't have to, Jesus is on his way to the servant's house, and you don't have, just say the, it was like God just saying, okay, I'll do that. So our expanding view of God, the moment we try to limit God, even to our theology, even to how we interpret the Bible, he always just leaves us in wide-eyed wonder. And God is using people, especially when he uses people that we don't feel he should be using. Messes with our ego. So it's okay to search, poke, seek, knock. And here's my biggest realization as I began this resurgent life. My need for God, my view of God, and my experience with God, it's different than yours. There can be some overlapping and similarities, but I don't know him like you know him. And guess what? You don't know him like I know him. And that doesn't mean more or better. It just means uniqueness. Right. Last time I was here, I spoke about the 6 rooms that are missing in God's house. Right. In my Father's house, there are many rooms, right? And I talked about some rooms we should have in the church, metaphorically, that we should open up. And one is a panic room where people can come. It was a message broadening our circle of love for people. A panic room. Meaning if people are panicking in life, maybe it's a divorce, maybe it's an emotional, some sort of traumatic, that they can come and we don't give them this feeling that they have to be fixed immediately. Right? Because panicking is a part of humanity. But apparently it's not part of Christianity. Right? Religion will flourish under being in control. It's always about that. Anything we're wrestling with, if you ask enough questions and you boil it down and you strip it away, anything and everything boils down to one of two forces, love or fear. Love or fear. Love or fear. There's no fear in love. It has no restraints. Everything boils down. Motivating factor, fear or love. So we also taught, man, am I in faith? Am I in faith? Maybe the better question is, am I in love or fear? Because fear takes away, love gives.
And faith works through love.
Yep, these three things remain. Faith, hope, love. So I felt like with, especially the denomination I grew up in, there were these transactional arrangements. As if I spent enough time, in prayer, if I got up early in the morning and I prayed long enough, then I would be more anointed to speak His word. Now, I'm not diminishing the fact of the spiritual disciplines, but when we hang our righteousness up on it, we got to be careful that our view and idea of God and what it means to be, this, that, and that, evangelist and intercessory, all that. We got to be careful that our view of God does not become God. Because it certainly easily can. And I was taught, man, brother, you got to get up in the morning. You got to pray. You got to intercede. You got to pray in the Spirit. You get the victory. You get the victory for the day. I'm like, wow. I didn't know we could lose it while we were sleeping. I don't want to be walking through life leaking victory. Man. And then I would beat myself up. Man, I didn't pray enough. I didn't, I'm not fasting. I'm beat because the religion said, and we talked about this yesterday about fasting. If you do this, this is how it's done. This is the one-size-fits-all version. And I think it's a trap. And I think it's based in control. There's some good things. But I think it's like the church can sometimes be like that supermarket that's selling, both cigarettes and the nicotine patches. We're selling a solution, but we're also causing the problem. We're creating it. So I struggled to connect with this version, of this extremely needy God. God, He's so needy. We've got to worship Him all the time. We've got to, all of it, it's just, He needs to be joined. He needs to be fine. It's like God, man, God's lucky to have us. Because if He didn't have us, how would He move on this earth? How would He get to, Jesus He handed the baton off to us. He knew that we could, are you kidding me? That's going to be my first question when I get to heaven. Jesus, before you ascended and you left us to, you knew full well we'd screw it up. Why did you do that? Why? Love. Come on, all of us one time or the other have given the keys to our kids for the car, knowing fully well they weren't ready. And what's the last thing we would say? Listen, if you hurt the car, that's fine. Just don't hurt your head. Can always get a new car. Can't always get a new head, right? So, God is a transformational God. He's a spirit. Those who worship Him must worship Him in spirit and in truth. So there's a difference between religion and spirituality. Let me just rattle these off. Okay? Religion is belief in someone else's experience. Spirituality is having your own experience. Religion connects me to my group. Spirituality connects me to all of creation. Do you know when I'm on the beach, when I'm surrounded by the glory of God in nature, I don't feel broken. I can't always say that when I'm in church. I mean, we sing songs sometimes that we really don't mean. But it's just, once again, it's religion. Religion doesn't connect me always to what's real. The psalmist said, the scriptures for that, spirituality connects us to all creation. John said, all things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. The psalmist said, what a wildly wonderful world. Wasn't talking just about West Virginia. God, you made it all with wisdom at your side, made earth overflow with your wonderful creations. We're the crown of his creation, but there are so many other wonderful creations. Religion is transactional. Spirituality is transformational. Religion is rooted in ego. Spirituality is rooted in the real, higher, authentic, true, original, divine self. We're made in his image. There is part, especially the new birth, the new life, the Spirit of God that dwells within us. Ephesians 4 talks about it. Put on the new self, created after the likeness of God in true righteousness and holiness. Romans talks about our spirit, his spirit, the conversation that happens, bearing witness that we're God's children. Religion is about certainty. I love that. Yeah. Spirituality, curiosity. What if? What if you just say the word and my servant will be healed? What? This meeting's packed. What if we vandalize the roof and bring our lame friend through the ceiling? What if? Get curious. Just get curious. Stay curious, my friends. Jeremiah 29, you will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. You ever try to find something? You don't find something where you already know where it is. You get curious and you look and play. What? As I said before, we have to be careful. Our idea about God doesn't become God. Because religion tries to make us comply when we are curious. Comply? Yeah. Oh, they're drunk. They're drunk. They're drunk. Well, we're not drunk as you suppose. No, we're not. Talking about Acts chapter 2. The emerging generations want to be spiritual, not religious. We think that our country is going to hell in a handbasket because of the exodus of what's happening in some churches. People aren't going back to church, things like that. But people are more inspired and interested in spirituality than they are religion. So I'm going to stop there. I have 10 reasons why that is happening, why spirituality is on the rise, and why the traditional way of doing church is on decline. But I think I'm going to finish with calling. Is that all right? All right, let's finish with calling. All right. Keith, can you give me 5 more minutes? What's that? All right. Okay. Okay.
He's got all the time in the world, man. He's got a good relationship with time. It's a transactional relationship.
a timer on here. All right, here we go. Calling. I think there's been a lot of misconceptions of calling that I've experienced growing up in the church. I remember being 15 years old and going to a youth convention and just being zapped by God and just seeing in my heart this picture of my dad playing drums, and then I was playing the drums, and my dad speaking, preaching, and then I was speaking, you know. And if you've worked in youth ministry for any period of time, you know there's a lot of passion there and a lot of inspiration. And sometimes that's the foundation and not so much wisdom and information. And I think when you have both inspiration and information, passion and wisdom hand in hand, you got something pretty powerful. You know, that's why Paul told Timothy, you know, don't let anyone look down upon you because you're young, but set an example in this, this, and this. He also instructed to that which you've learned, pass on to others. That's why the multi-generational model, God is all about a God. God is all about diversity. He really is. One thing that I realized is that the calling we're born with, and it's already in us. Your calling. You were born with your calling already in you. Jeremiah 1:5 says, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. That verse always kind of intrigued me. Before you were formed in the womb, I knew you. How do you know? Wait a second. Do you know a tree? Do you know a rock? It's something to think about. All internal processes are what you need to assist you with your calling. Often, it can take a trauma, it could take a setback, it could take something to accelerate the awareness of your calling. Saul becoming Paul, Galatians 1:15, where he set him apart. You don't need to go anywhere to look for anything to find your calling. It will find you. It's within you. I think when we get over-identified with a role, it can eclipse our calling. I see this all the time. Man, every time I'm at a worship conference, somebody wants to talk to me or somebody else in the back room, and they want to leave their job to become a worship leader because God's called them to be a worship leader. So I ask them a series of questions. You know, you think God is calling you to a role? Because many times we traditionally have thought of calling as a role. God's called me to be a pastor. God's called me to be a worship. God's called me to be an intercessor. God's called me to a role. So what happens when that role ends? Are you no longer called? You no longer have a calling? I think this is why some people just stay in a role longer than they should, because they think their life's going to be over, or they're less called. You know, roles change, callings don't. Roles change, callings don't. Someone that's called to be a pastor, I can go broader and say you're called to help people, and you can do that in countless roles. Your gift might be to administrate. Your gift might be, you know, whatever it is, there are endless roles that you can function in. And the truth of the matter is you cannot become anything you aren't already. You can't become anything that you aren't already. Dale Carnegie said this about people. People's gifts, people are a wealth of gifts, and they must be mined out of them. He was talking about it's already in them. Purpose. God creates us with a purpose. We're here as an answer to a problem, as a solution to a situation. And you don't long for anything that isn't already part of you. Here's my example. Moses his calling as a deliverer existed even before he met up with God at the burning bush. He saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew slave, and he stepped in as a deliverer. But many of us, those callings are dormant. Dormancy is muted presence. Dormancy is muted presence. It feels absent because you are unaware of it. Dormancy is muted presence. It feels absent because you are unaware of it. But when you get still to notice it from within, you start to realize external things only awaken what's already in you. Luke Skywalker story, right? The visitation from the droid. Calling first is a push away from something or someone. There's an energy, a spirit of it. It's not clear the why, but the push is the beginning that leads you to more clarity. As Moses, right? What is it? He's a deliverer. He's stepping in. It's driving him to the wilderness. It's driving him in places where other encounters bring greater awarenesses. He had a dilemma. He was seeing himself both as an Egyptian and a Hebrew, but he was a deliverer. That wasn't the dilemma. Am I a Hebrew? Am I Egyptian? Am I a Hebrew? I'm a deliverer. That push sadly lasted 40 years. So it's natural to have resistance to the calling. You know, you remember what Luke did after he saw the hologram? He was like, this can't, he denied it. It's like, there's no way this is going to happen. I'm never going to get out of here. It's that classic moment whether you keep going or going back. Many carry a calling by responsibility, not by capability. Let me say that again. Many carry a calling by responsibility, not capability. I'm doing this because I feel responsible, so I keep trying, and I'm not doing it well, but, Let me ask you a question. Why do you do that? Why do you think you do that? Why do you keep carrying a burden that's undesigned for you? Callings come with assistance to fulfill them, but not a manual to understand them. All right, so let me finish by this. Let me skip to what is your calling, and then I'll close with this. If I was to ask you, what is your calling? And we were to take away the roles of it. Here's how I began to discover it. This is just my road, okay? And the last time I was here, I talked about finding the why in your life. Finding your why. Call it calling, purpose, whatever. There's so many things that are around you that point to it and awaken you to your calling. Here's what, for me. All my life, in leadership, in relationships to leadership, I have been the one or one of the ones to do one of two things. To step up and speak out. I'm not talking about in a malicious way, but to say, hey, there's an elephant in this room, guys. I think maybe we should talk about it. Or someone to say, well, if we've been doing it this way and we're not getting anywhere, well, maybe there's something, curiosity, right? I've always been one to challenge the status quo, not because I'm insubordinate, not because I'm rebellious, because I feel this internal pushback that, okay, something is withholding the true potential of this thing, of this person. That's why I became a teacher. That's why I became a football coach. Why I became an evangelist. That's why I became, Then I started looking at my entertainment and my favorite movies. Remember the Titans, Shawshank Redemption, Nacho Libre. You know. So all of these movies had to do with some sort of freedom, breaking away from oppression of some kind. And the more I began to ask myself these questions, I'm like, wait a second. My why, my calling, is that I am a freedom giver. I am an awakener to give people freedom. My most successful worship album was called Free to Worship. And it was done at a time where churches were being split because of worship style. God called me to awaken the freedom in others. To see the activist and the artist, the author and the blogger, the comedian and the party storyteller, the engineer and the organizer. Somebody saw Nelson Mandela, the president, and the prisoner. God saw the Paul and the Saul, the Peter and the Simon, the Abraham and the Abram. What's your calling? Your unique you and your calling is what we have been waiting for. That's why freedom and the journey of freedom is so important to me to help people with, because your best you, the newest, greatest version of you to date, is the greatest gift that you can give to me, to your family, to your world. We need you free, and you need me free. And the process of becoming a disciple, the process of being a God follower, the process of being awakened and finding and forging meaning is greater freedom to be ambassadors, agents of reconciliation, people that will improve the lives of others. Because at the end of the day, right? At the end of the day, at the end of this life, we meet God. And He's going to tell us one of two things. He's either going to say, well done. Or, well, you're done. But next, who's next? Well done, good and faithful servant. He doesn't say, well done, perfect servant, straight A student. Yeah, you flunked some classes, you failed some classes, you dropped out at times. Yeah, but you kept getting back up. You kept on showing up. You kept on growing up. Well done. You were faithful and responsible with what I gave you, why I designed you. And that is why I am a freedom giver. But what about you? Can we just take 5 minutes and just this solemn moment? And then we'll get going. But here's what I want to do. I don't want to do anything other than just establish just a palette right now of reverence. This is just you and God and your thoughts and yourself. And just allow Him to speak to you. It might be one word of who you are, what your why. It might be one word. I want you to write it down, whatever it is, in this moment. We're just going to take a few minutes. God is just speaking words, single words, a word to some of you right now. Some of you are hearing the word healing. Life is healing to the hurting. Some of you keep hearing the word hope. You give hope. Peace. Some of you hear the word peace. Giving others rest in their dark confusion. Love, you just love. You love those alone, those who have been left all by themselves. You're a reuniter. You are a repairer. You're one who stands in the gap. You provide labor in fields no one wants to work in, to go where no one thinks it's worth going. You might be a connector, a reuniter, one who mends relationships. What is your why? What is your why? What purpose are you here for? What gifts? What plans? What power has He put in you for? This is your time. Stand and arise. Oh, someone is waiting right here for you. Right here for you. Waiting for you to be the best version of you. You might be saying, "Here I am, Lord, send me," but He's saying, you need to say, "Here am I. I'm going to be me. I'm going to be the person, God, you've created me to be." Stripping away from those labels, those roles, to expand, to enlarge my circle of love, to go, to be, to do, to stand, show up, and speak your truth to them. So, Father, I bless every person here in the sound of my voice. I call forth out of those layers the man, the woman of God. Arise and walk in your destiny. I command by the blood of Jesus for the prison gates, the walls, the distortions, the confusions, the chains that bind, the chains that remind you of your past. Be gone, be loosened. Stand on what used to bind you. You're free. Free from all captivity. Jesus. I appreciate you guys very much. Let me just close with one more thing. Tomorrow, I'm going to be talking about what's in our hearts. And I'm going to be talking about sometimes we fail to work out and bring out what's in our hearts because we think it's too small, it's too big, and it's everywhere in between. So we wait, we pray, we wait, we pray, we wait, we pray, we wait, we wait, we wait, and we wait for God to move. So I want you to come tomorrow prepared. Take what you have learned today. Take what He has said to you right here and then. Because level 2, He's going to add to that tomorrow. All right, Pastor, do you have anything to share?
Oh, it was really good, man. Appreciate it. We do need to sing happy birthday to Keith, though.
Okay. Happy birthday. Which one? Keith, how young are you?
Going with the hair.
How old are you? Old enough to know better. All right, here's your note. Ready to sing? Here's your note. Ready? Ah! Everything else? How about happy birthday to you? Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Kevin. Happy birthday to you. What? Nice. Woo!
You have to cry, bro.
Thanks, guys, for taking your time off of this busy Saturday. Thank you for giving me 20 minutes to run a little over. Hopefully it was worth it. Hey, Melissa did a wonderful thing and set up my table. I just brought some new design Resurgence t-shirts with me if you want to support our ministry and buy them. I do have a Venmo. Can you put up that? There it is. If you want to partner with us, you can scan there to donate. If you want to buy some shirts, I'll be back there as well. Yeah, Ruth, yeah. Focus your camera on that little scan, and it'll take you to a link, just what she said.